Hey everybody, I'm Justin and welcome back to another episode of my Garage Talk. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the brand new 2018 Honda Civic Type R that's coming to the United States for the first time in history. Now, there has been pretty good information available for this car for the past few months. There's also been previous generations of the Type R in other markets than the US. But just in the last couple days here, we've got even more details. We're going to go through what we know, what I've learned and read about on the internet and other resources already. We'll talk about my thoughts and impressions on exterior styling, engine and chassis, interior ergonomics and styling. And of course, I'd love to get your guys' feedback on what you think of the new Civic Type R as well. It's time for some Garage Talk. Alright, now before we get into the Honda Civic Type R, we're going to talk a little bit about why I am excited about this car. A front wheel drive Honda Civic sporty sedan. Yes, it has 4 doors and it's a Type R, only the second Type R that we have seen in the US, at least to my knowledge. The first one was the Acura Integra Type R, an iconic import from way back when. Not too terribly old, but quite a while ago. It was an awesome car. I've driven quite a few of them, and really hoping that the Civic Type R kind of lives up to that Integra Type R heritage and continues that awesome tradition of front wheel drive sports cars. All right, so why am I excited about the Honda Civic Type R? We're gonna take a little trip down pit memory lane, does that work? Anyways, stepping a little bit back in time to when I got started out in cars. I'm traditionally a motorcycle guy, a sport bike rider from years past when I was younger, and got into cars after riding sport bikes and motorcycles for many years. But anyways, when I got into cars originally in the late 90s, early 2000s, I got into the import scene like a lot of people, the Fast and the Furious days, all of that kind of stuff. My first sporty car was actually an Acura Integra GSR. Not quite an Integra Type R, but the next best thing. Had the B18C engine. Front wheel drive, of course, had the sporty looks like the Integra Type R. And it was a very, very fun car to drive. Now, Integra GSRs weren't known for being terribly fast or quick, so like a lot of people back in those days, I turbocharged my Integra GSR. I pieced together a custom turbo kit with a T3, T4 turbo, Hondata for the engine management, a max rev manifold and downpipe, custom 3-inch exhaust, and a bunch of other stuff as well. Wheels and tires, some suspension bits from Tokiko. Had it lowered a little bit, it was looking really good. And once it was turbocharged, it made decent power and was even more fun than it was when it was stock. The Integra GSR lasted for a little while before I eventually parted it out and traded it up for a 2003 Mitsubishi Evolution 8. But my next dive into the Honda tuner world was with a 1996 Civic hatchback. I bought the car bone stock from a friend of mine with a D-Series engine, the 1.6 liter 4-banger, which made approximately 0 horsepower or a roundabouts. So naturally I was gonna go big with this one. I actually built a complete engine from the ground up. I bought a block off of Craigslist. I bought a cylinder head, had it all refreshed and honed to fit brand new Wiseco pistons, Eagle H-beam rods, refreshed the head, 1000cc injectors for E85, again Hondata for the engine management, put a really awesome ram horn style turbo manifold on it, tile wastegate, tile blow-off valve, all the high-end parts. This car was awesome. It made 330 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. I actually have some really old videos on my YouTube channel here of doing dyno pulls with that 1996 Civic hatchback. So both those cars were great fun. The Integra GSR that I turbocharged at 7 PSI. The 96 Civic hatch with my custom built motor making big power. And even though I've moved on from front wheel drive cars to rear wheel drive cars, lightweight, nimble and agile rear wheel drive cars, I still kind of have a soft spot for those old imports. It was a lot of fun building those cars, a lot of fun driving them. And in a nutshell, that's kind of why I'm looking forward to the new Honda Civic Type R. I really don't get too excited about imports, but this one does look fun, it does look very cool, and I would love to drive one someday. Alright, so let's get to it. The 2018 Honda Civic Type R. Exterior styling, I gotta say, I am impressed by this. It is wild looking, it takes a little bit to get used to, at least in my opinion. The front of the car, very aggressive. You got the big scoops on the side. The front lip, with the red accent, the very aggressive slanted front headlights, and of course you have the hood scoop, presumably for cooling, maybe for the intercooler or one of the oil coolers. I'm not quite sure on that. In any regard, it looks pretty sweet. Now moving on to the side of the car, to me this thing looks very Subaru WRX-ish in my opinion. It's got similar doors, again the 4 doors, door styling, side skirts, and the front fenders kind of have a similar flair to a WRX, maybe even an STI. You also have the 20-inch wheels on the car. Again, more red accents around the rims, at least in the photos that I've seen. So looking pretty good from the side profile. Now looking at the rear of the car, this is where things get a little bit crazy. I gotta say this is probably the most outspoken part of the design on the new Civic Type R. It's got the giant wing in the back for the aero. The aero is supposedly functional on the car, the underbody aero, the side skirts, the front lip, the diffuser, and the rear wing. And then you have the crazy looking bumper with the large gaping holes or vents on the right and left lower sides. I'm not quite sure what to make of that yet. My mind is telling me at first glance, wow, that is weird looking, but the more I look at it, the more it kind of grows on me. So we'll see when I see one in person. That's kind of going to be the judgment point, or the judgment day, if you will, on the rear end of the car. The pictures, I'm sure they don't do it justice, so just gonna have to wait until we see it in person. One of the other big standouts on the rear of the car is the very unique 3-tipped exhaust system. So it's got the 2 large holes on the outside, a smaller exhaust hole on the middle. Supposedly the smaller inner exhaust hole is for when the car is driving in lower RPM ranges to keep noise down. So the roof of the car, nothing too special looking. It doesn't appear to have a carbon fiber roof like a lot of performance cars do these days. It does have some aero bits and some contours which look to be directing airflow maybe over the wing in the back. And of course on the rear bumper you've got the Type R badging as expected. Overall I think this thing looks pretty sweet. Again, I'm not too sure on the rear end of the car, the bumper section of the car just yet. Have to see it in person to get a real feel and real judgment of what this thing looks like. So what do you guys think? Is this thing way too aggressive, not aggressive enough? I think it's pretty dang good, maybe leaning on the too aggressive side, but again, just have to see. They did a lot of stuff to the exterior of this new car, and so far I'm liking it, but now we're gonna move on to engine and chassis. So engine and chassis, I haven't seen a whole lot of pics of the engine bay or the suspension systems behind the wheels, anything like that. We do know that the engine is a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine with a turbocharger, which is a big change for Honda and traditional Civics and Honda cars in general. As we know, most of those cars over the years are naturally aspirated. And of course, it does have the VTEC Yo, making roughly 306 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque. It does 0 to 60 or 62 in 5.5 or 5.7 seconds, somewhere around there. So not terribly quick, but pretty quick for what it is. It's gonna come in a 3-pedal mode only with a 6-speed manual transmission, limited slip differential, which is a must for a front-wheel drive sports car because otherwise you have ridiculous torque steer and you're spinning one tire, smoking it off if you got any kind of power under the car. And of course, like all performance cars these days, you have multiple driving modes. It defaults to the sport mode, then it has a less aggressive boring mode or comfort mode, and then the plus R mode or some kind of race mode where naturally things like your throttle and steering are going to tighten up, become more responsive. It has adaptive suspension, which actually changes the stiffness of the shocks in real time. Talking more about the suspension, it does have independent rear suspension, which is unique to this car. It has a more stiff and rigid chassis compared to previous generations. And naturally for the brakes, you've got Brembo big brake kit front and rear for stopping power. Now for me, the engine in this car is probably the biggest, most significant piece of the new Civic Type R. Back in the day with the Integra Type R, you had the B18 C5 naturally aspirated engine, which was a phenomenal engine. And Honda is pretty well known for making nice, naturally aspirated engines like you find in the S2000, the Acura NSX, and again the Integra Type R. So the turbo engine is something new, something different for the Civic. Back in the day we used to turbocharge our Civics and our Integras and that kind of thing. Now we've got them from the factory. We're gonna have to see how they drive. With turbos, of course, you're gonna get turbo lag and a somewhat different power curve than you would with a naturally aspirated engine. The plus side is you get massive amounts of torque and a little bit more power as well. So what's everybody's thoughts on the engines? Did Honda do the right thing going with a turbocharger? I think they were probably forced into that situation with emissions and efficiency that are required today out of modern cars. So in that regard, it's not a big surprise. Next up, we'll move into the interior. Alright, so the Honda Civic Type R interior, as expected, we've got big, high bolstered sport seats, lots of red stitching, red accents, red stripes, red everything in the pictures that I have seen. Not quite sure if all of the cars will come with all of those red accents and that red theme, but lots of red, seatbelts, stitching, accents. It's got red stuff everywhere. The dash and the cockpit area look pretty compact, pretty clean and simplistic, which is a good thing. Does not appear to have excessive amounts of gadgetry and widgets and all kinds of things cluttering up the dash. The in-dash gauges are all digital. It looks like you got 3 digital displays in the center of the dash area behind the steering wheel, giving you all of the vehicle information. Steering wheel controls on the steering wheel, pretty common for new cars these days. I like that. When I went to my new 2017 BRZ, that was actually a big upgrade for me, having steering wheel controls on the car. So you're gonna find those on the Honda Civic Type R as well. Again, we have a 6-speed transmission. There is no automatic. 3 pedals is the default, that's all you get. And you have 4 seats. It's a 4-door sedan. Big, comfortable seats in the rear. Well, probably kind of big. It's not a terribly huge car, but you have 4 usable seats. If you remember back in the old Integra Type R, it was a coupe and the back seats were pretty much non-existent, kind of like they are in the FRS, BRZ, and 86. Alright guys, so let's wrap this thing up. We've got the 2018 Honda Civic Type R, aggressive styling, mean looks, a questionable rear end and bumper in my opinion. We've got the powerful turbocharged engine pushing over 300 horsepower, nearly 300 pound-feet of torque. The 6-speed manual gearbox, which I think is a big plus. We've got Brembo brakes, adaptive dampers, sweet aero on the car. Then we've got the interior with insane amounts of red, stitching, accents, seatbelts, red again. So what are your thoughts on this car? Do you like what you see? Do you like what you've read and heard about the car? So it seems like a pretty good package. About the only downfall that I can see with this is that it is wrong wheel drive or front wheel drive. The engine makes a lot of power. It will be interesting to see how it actually puts that power down to the road. I know with my cars, specifically my high powered Civic hatchback, the one that made over 300 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque, that car could not keep the tires from spinning when I got on it. In 2nd gear, 3rd gear, it would just spin tires like crazy, even when we had boost by gear enabled. Alright, so a lot of car for the money. This thing is coming in at what people are saying is around $35,000 or mid $30,000 range. So it could be a pretty good value for the price that you pay. Granted, there are lots of competitors in that space, in that price range, that are not front wheel drive, but all wheel drive, even rear wheel drive. So the 2018 Honda Civic Type R, yet another player in that space. Alright everybody, that's my thoughts on the 2018 Honda Civic Type R. I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this episode of Garage Talk, I would appreciate it if you smash that like button, share it with all your friends, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you again everybody for watching. I will talk to you all next time.